Hello, everyone. My name is Nico, and today I'm just going to be giving a summary of my story of deconstruction. It's something that is asked a lot by people when I do lives on TikTok or when I engage in conversations with believers, Christians of the like, that they tend to ask me, well, why are you an atheist when you used to be a Christian? And then some take the position I never was a Christian before, so they ask me, why did I think I used to be a Christian? And so I just decided to just make a video to put all that kind of together, something I can use for reference and say, well, this is my story, go check it out. Um, I also hope that it gives a little bit of context about me so that people can understand that this was something that was very, very real to me. It's something that I took incredibly serious, and that I'm being very genuine and honest when I say that this is what I used to believe and now I no longer do, but I still enjoy having the conversations with people. It's still something that technically I'm still open about. I am now going from a Christian an agnostic atheist, which basically breaks down to I have no knowledge of God or gods, and I have no belief in any God or gods. And that's simply it. So, deconstruction itself is just simply the taking of your beliefs and breaking them down to understand what you believe and why. And so that's what I ended up doing with Christianity. It wasn't something that I set out to do, it wasn't something that I intended to do or even thought about doing until it was already happening. Um, I'm not sharing this with the goal of trying to deconvert anyone or change anyone's mind, just simply to give a little bit of background about me, and I hope that it helps answer some questions. But yeah, moving forward, um, I want to say I was about 3 or 4 years old when my mom met and married this guy, and he was a Christian. And he was the major influence for God in my life. He taught me about Jesus and Christianity and the sacrifice that Jesus made for us on the cross, the resurrection. And it wasn't until about 7, 8 years old that I was like, all right, I can make this decision for myself. I'm saved. Um, and I prayed and we got me baptized, all that fun stuff. Um, this definitely was something that was incredibly real to me. Looking back, I know it's easy to say you were a child, you were indoctrinated, you didn't actually believe that stuff because you were just believing what you were told. But for me, from my perspective, I 100% believed in it. My relationship with God was 100% separate from my parents, from my dad's relationship with God, any of that. My own walk with God was my own. It wasn't shared with anyone else. Sure, I may have had guidance from some people, like people from church or people like my dad, but at the end of the day, it was just me and God. And I truly believed I had this personal relationship with God, that I was growing up with God. And I felt truly that I could hear Him and feel Him as I was reading the scripture, as I was engaging in prayer, or even sometimes when I was at church. I too felt the Holy Spirit while I was at church. And all of it was incredibly real to me. It wasn't something that I ever thought in my life that I was ever going to doubt or question. And I don't think that there's enough words for me to fully convey how intertwined my identity was with pleasing God and with wanting to do my best for God. And that did lead to some, bumps in the road. I didn't really see them as bumps in the road back then, but looking back, I think that yes, there were things that needed to be, addressed that I didn't address because, again, of this belief that I held. And I'll give an example. When I was still young, I went to my neighbor's house across the street, and I used to do some yard work for her and play with her dog and stuff like that. Great times. What more could a kid ask for in the summer? But I remember one time that one of her friends came over and they were chatting. I was chatting with them, and my neighbor's like, I'm going to go inside, get us some drinks, get us some snacks, and I'll be right back. So she goes inside and she starts doing her thing, and I'm left alone with this adult woman that I have never met before in my life that is my neighbor's friend. And after a little bit, this woman says, so I hear you're a Christian, is that true? And I said, yes, it is, 100%. And she reaches into her purse, and this woman, this adult woman, pulls out a knife, a pocket knife, and she opens it up, she points it out at me, and she says, "Are you sure that you're a Christian? I want you to really think about it. Are you a Christian? Do you love Jesus?" And I remember that, of course, I was scared. I was a child, and this was an adult holding a weapon out at me. And I remember praying and saying, "Hey, God, I don't know what to do right now. I'm really scared, and I need your help to do what I have to do. And I think I'm going to see you soon." And so I looked at her and I said, "Yes, I'm a Christian. Yes, I love Jesus." And there was this really long, awkward, tense moment before she starts to laugh. And she puts the knife away and she says that it was a test. It was a test, and good job, because I passed. It didn't matter what the situation was. I was ready to always say that, yes, I believed and I loved Jesus. And that was the end of our interaction. I don't really remember if I left right away after that or if I stayed a bit after that, but what I do remember is I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my parents, I didn't tell my friends, I didn't tell anyone at school, I didn't tell anyone till years later down the road this story. And the reason why is because it was a test. It was a test, and like Abraham and Isaac, that was for me to know something. This was something that God did with me, and now there's more knowledge obtained. My faith in God grew because of it. Going around and telling people about it would be a sin. It would be prideful. It would be boasting in, look what I was going to do. Look what I was ready to do. And so I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell anyone until I was an adult. And I was at a party with a bunch of my friends. I was not in the most sober mind, but I shared my story because we were sharing, some fun stories of our childhood. And it wasn't until then that it dawned on me that this was not a typical story, that this was not a story that should have just been brushed away. And the reactions I got from it were mixed, but they were all negative, just, to what degree of negative. But it made me go back and think a lot of how so quickly in just a few years my mindset had gone from this thing that I should have told my parents at the very least happened to me, the belief and the indoctrination that I had already held in just a short amount of time ensured that my entire childhood, this abuse situation was something I never voiced. And it's not uncommon. The older I get, the more people I talk to, the more books I read, I come across stories of other people who grew up in these type of environments that faced abusive situations that in that moment did not understand, recognize, or even take it as abusive. And it wasn't until later that they realized how harmful that stuff really was. And that's just one example that I can point to. But the point of that is that just because children believe, just because children are in fact strong in faith, and that is very much put up by Christianity, the out of the mouth of babes, and that God has taken the truth from the wise ones and given it to the little ones, and stuff like that. Children having faith in God is supposed to be a beautiful thing in Christianity. So children having faith in God that end up allowing abuse to happen to them because they don't understand, because the adults in their life have taught them kind of basically to ignore it for these other things and prioritize these other things. Looking back on it, I recognize the harm in that, and I see it a lot more, obviously, now. And I think that that's something that really needs to be discussed a lot more. Something that should be brought to people's attention a lot more, especially the parents in Christianity that are still in it. I don't think a lot of them realize how some of the things they say do in fact impact their children and probably, potentially, for the rest of their lives. But going back to my story, my entire childhood was filled with signs of my faith and my belief in God. I Went around. One of the things that my dad and I like to do is we went around. We gave out Bible tracts to people, to children. Well, I mostly handed them to children. He handed them mostly to adults. But we sat, we talked with people. We went soul winning. We went around to different churches. We surrounded God in our lives 24/7. When we woke up, it was to, we wanted to pray. When it was to go to sleep, we had to read the Bible before we went to sleep. My siblings and I, if we wanted to see a movie, we had to watch something that was related to God or Jesus first, so we can have God first on our minds. And you know what? Like it wasn't all bad. There were some really cool things, some really cool radio programs, TV shows, anything. From again, these are from the perspectives of children. From VeggieTales to Adventures in Odyssey to Down Gilead Lane, Paws and Tails. All of those were really fun for us, and so we took that content in, and like TV shows. I had a little radio that only had two stations. It was called a His Kids radio. Of course, both stations were Christians, one more for kids, one more for adults, but they had all these radio programs on there and music and worship and all that fun jazz. So, needless to say, God, Jesus, the Bible, that was just 24/7 presence everywhere I went in my life. At church, at school, because I went to a private Christian school, and at home, because we had church at home, and everything that we did, ate and breathed was Jesus. And that was good for me. I really enjoyed it. I loved learning more, and I feel like the things that scared a lot of people my age didn't really scare me. Hell, for example, I was perfectly fine with the concept of hell, mostly because I didn't believe I was going there because I was saved. But but in my even little mind, I understood why hell existed, and the justice in God's system, which now I don't as an adult, which is kind of funny. But um, I remember that we had these things. I called them the hell tapes. I don't think that's what they were called, but that's what I called them. It was just this giant thick case, and it had cassette tapes inside. And they were the story of this woman who apparently Jesus used to visit her in the middle of the night and would take her soul to hell. This happened in about the span, I want to say, about a month. And it was so that she could see what hell was really like. And each night, Jesus gave her like a little bit more of a tour of hell. And she saw what souls look like, what the fire looked like, what, people's quote, like, not cells, but pits, I guess, that they were trapped in look like. All this crazy stuff. And her whole point was to go back and be like, hey, everyone, hell is real. This is what it's like. You don't want to go there. Believe in Jesus. And that was like the whole point of that. But I ate that shit up. I loved learning about it. I loved hearing about it. It was something that my mom even thought I was too young for, and told my dad no more. And we actually listened to it in secret. I think this is the very first secret I remember keeping from my mom with my dad, because I just wanted to know more about the Bible and God, even though this was technically extra biblical stuff, this woman's testimony. But I still found it fascinating, and I still love to listen to it. And there were other things like demons, spiritual warfare. I was all about reading the demonology books and learning about different possession cases, what demons could do to us, how to cast them out in the name of Jesus, all that fun jazz. And lots of other Christian kids my age, that stuff was scary. They didn't want to think about it that kind of way. And another thing, the rapture. I was excited for the rapture. I thought it was cool, whereas other people my age and even some adults that I spoke to had a deep fear of the rapture. And, I just kept telling them, well, that's just because you aren't confident in your salvation. You don't have to fear the rapture because we're going to be okay. Whether you believe in pre-trib or mid-trib, whatever the case is, we're going to be okay. We're going to get to heaven. We're going to be with Jesus. No need to worry about it. So, needless to say, as a child growing up, I ate it all up. I loved it. I wanted to learn more, and I wanted to be so invested more in Jesus. And it caused some rifts. The older I got, the more relationships I started to build. with friendships, with ex-girlfriends. Um, Having this belief, I felt, I was just a normal person going through normal people things, giving what I could to God and, battling in the spirit with what God could help me with in the things that I felt like I couldn't ignore. I was a growing child at one point too, a growing adult, and I struggled with my own things with looking at porn, masturbation. I tried to give all that to God, say I know I shouldn't do this. You want me to not do this, so please help me. Um, all of these things that I was very close with my personal relationship with God, at least from my side. Everything that happened, everything that I struggled with, I prayed about and I gave it to Him, and I did my best to hear from Him. And sometimes I believed I did, and sometimes I didn't think I did, but that was okay because that didn't mean anything. He was still there. And so it got to the point where I was like in my early 20s, and I was out of school, I was out of the house, I was living with a fiance at the time, a roommate, and I just felt like just work life, I was not as close in my relationship with God as I had been before. And I wanted that to change. And so I prayed about it, and I said, God, like I'm so sorry for neglecting our relationship, and I want to fix that, and I need your help, like let's fix it. And so for the next few weeks, I did what I felt was my best. I cut off conversations with certain people that I felt, were just bringing me out to drink, to, smoke some weed and stuff like that, not really being too much of a good influence for me, especially with me trying to get back onto my walk with God. Um, I listened to more sermons. I went back to church. I was, trying to connect with more of my old Christian friends again. And so one of the things that was new to me at this time, probably not new in general, but new to me, were podcasts. And so I was like, all right, you know what? I work in a warehouse and I just work there for 12 to 14 hours a day. I can listen to my earbuds, so I'm just going to find a bunch of sermons, a bunch of shows, and I'm just going to listen to them. And so that's what I did. I looked up Christianity, and I went ahead and I downloaded a bunch of different podcasts, things that went over sermons, things that went over different scriptures, different Bible studies, all that fun stuff. And it was during that search that I came across a podcast called Your Atheist Pastor. And it was by this guy who said that he used to be a Pentecostal pastor, and now he's an atheist. And that's basically what his description said. And I was struck by that because I thought that that was impossible. Pentecostal going to an atheist, I felt like that was just way too different extremes, and you couldn't get from one to the other. And then also, I had never met an atheist before, or at least that I had known at that time. And so I was like, wow, an atheist, how weird. And so I went ahead and I listened to it. I listened to the first couple episodes, which were his deconstruction story. And I couldn't believe how much the first half of it I related to. How he described his relationship with God and how he felt towards it and how much he loved God. And as his story continued, I just couldn't help but feel real bad for him as I heard him talk about the doubts he started to feel and to think about, how he started to pray about them, how God just wasn't there anymore after a certain point, and the pain in his voice as he recollected how lonely all of it was. Um, his whole life changed. He was a pastor. This was his job. And then he didn't believe it anymore. And he talked about how hard all that was. And it kind of sucks because, he's, since then, he has moved on with his life, and I'm very happy with him. He has moved on to bigger and better things, and the future only seems to be brighter for him. But he left his old faith and deconstruction, all that stuff behind. He took down his podcast, his episodes. they're not there anymore. And that kind of sucks because I wish that we could go back. I wish we could go and re-listen to these type of things, because he didn't just share his story. He shared other people's stories, and he interviewed other people, authors, rabbis. I think he even interviewed the high priestess of the Satanic Temple at one point. And he was very good at conversating with people and getting their stories, and people answering his questions and sharing what it was that made them start thinking about things in a different way, what that led to. And I just kept hearing all these deconstruction stories. And I thought, you know what? Yeah, some of them are good questions. And I think that with God's help, we can answer them. And I ended up talking with this group and being a part of this group, and it wasn't intentional. It wasn't something that I wanted to happen. But I started to, be like, no, those are some good questions I don't know. And it got to the point where even praying and reading the Bible, I couldn't find the answers. But logically, some things made sense, some things did not make sense. And the things that didn't make sense, I prayed about. And it started to end up snowballing my own deconstruction. And like I said, not willingly. And when I realized that's what was happening, there was a lot of prayer, a lot of crying, a lot of depression. And I remember going through this long period of months when I felt so alone. I feel doesn't even begin to scratch at the surface of what I felt in that time. I just felt so broken, and I just kept crying for God to just be with me like he was before in any way. It didn't have to be like as personal or that feeling as before, just to at least know that he is there. And it just kept getting worse and worse. I ended up, falling into the nihilist hole, wondering like, oh man, like, if there is no God, what do I do? Why am I even here? What is the purpose of any of this? Why should we be here? And, I had all those, I think, very normal thoughts that lots of people do when they're shifting major belief systems. And it was a very hard time for me. It was something that I did mostly alone. I very quickly drove away a lot of my Christian friends because they didn't want to handle it. They didn't want to talk about it anymore. They didn't want to get doubts of their own, so they wouldn't talk to me about it. They would recommend me to like different pastors and stuff, but all the churches I visited, none of them were helpful. All of them were like, well, it sounds like you're just doubting, and we don't deal with that. So, and you know what? That was fine. That was fine. I don't blame any of them for it. I think that regardless, I think just based on who I was back then, wanting to know the truth and believing that if, in fact, my God was the truth, then he would still be there at the end of any honest searching that I did. And I had faith in that. And you know what? It proved to be wrong, because by the end of it, I didn't find God. In fact, I found a world where I found a no-God system to be more probable. I think a lot has changed since 23, 24. So about 6, 7 years of slowly not being a Christian anymore. And my positions from the beginning of my deconstruction even to now, massively different. And I just want to talk about just a handful of them. When I was younger, I had lots of conversations with people my age about God and about the Bible and what the Bible actually said. The spirit of discernment, what it truly meant, what it was truly saying in certain passages. And I'd had disagreements and debates with other of my peers and stuff over that. Other preachers' kids would have debates with me because, hey, you're not saying the right thing. Well, let's look at the scripture, because the scripture clearly shows X, Y, Z. And we had our conversations about it. I remember then thinking like, this is the spirit of God in me that is trying to help others see the truth. And I'm sure they probably thought the same. When I was older, I just saw the whole thing as prideful. I knew more, I felt, and so I was going to win this argument. Um, and I feel like there are lots of things like that throughout my childhood and growing up as a Christian that I wasn't taking the right way, or that I had a very skewed idea on, that ended up actually, even some of them, causing more harm to myself or to others. Um, I do think that a lot of the positions I held, the grandiose perspective of myself that it gave me, I'm a Christian, I'm a son of God, I am not of this world. I am technically above it because I am a new creature in Christ and I am going to be in heaven with him. It ended up feeding into me this very big grandiose sense of self, and that caused a lot of turmoil and rifts in my relationship with people. It caused me to mistreat people because, yes, I thought to a certain degree I was more than them. That's because I had God and they didn't. I knew what was better for them. I knew what was right for them, what they needed to hear, because God was telling me. And back then, like I said, I thought I was doing what was best for myself, for them, or I thought at the very least I was being honest with certain people, and it's not my fault, I guess, if they rejected it, if they got mad that I believed in God or any of that. And I had one friend who even got upset with me, saying, "No, not you. You can't love God." And I said, "Yes, I do." And I was crying about it. But being older and looking back on stuff like that, I realized a lot of the beliefs I held, how they twisted my sense of reality, of self, and perspective for other people in a lot of ways. And I see the harm that that caused for myself, for other people, and harm that was not intended. It wasn't done quote unquote intentionally. It was done because the people in my life and myself at the time, that's what we truly thought was the truth. But now looking back on it, and I don't believe that being the truth anymore, all I see is avoidable harm. And I think that's one of the saddest things about this, is that it was avoidable. And I wish that I quote unquote grew up quicker so that I could come to these realizations quicker, but I didn't. I came to the realizations when I did. And all I can do is, from this point moving forward, is try to be the better version of me every single day. And so when I look back at the beliefs I used to have, at the crazy things I used to say to people, the homophobia, the sexism, it is stuff I'm ashamed about. Um, but it's stuff that I know that I have grown on. And I hope that it's stuff that I can help other people grow through as well. Because I do remember what it was like to think that way. And I do remember what it was like to hold these type of views. So when I talk to people online and when I hear people with their perspectives and they have that same attitude, and everyone is there saying, "Why are you still talking to them? It's a waste of time. They're never going to change." I can't get myself to agree to that because I changed. Because I once thought that way as well. I once said all those homophobic things too. I said all those sexist things too. And I truly believed them at one point. And then as I got older, got more life experience, the I feel the difference was is that I always wanted to know the truth. And I think it comes down to prioritizing which which do you want more, truth or your belief in God. And I think what really helped me start the journey of actually trying to figure out the answers is coming to the understanding that if God is true, and I truly believed he was, then my search for truth has to lead to God. And it didn't. And I'm not saying that that's the finality of it either. I am always looking for more truth because every day there's more to learn. I don't have all the answers. I don't know everything. I don't even come close to knowing everything, not even about religion. And so every day I learn more, I listen more, I read more, and I think that all we can do going forward is just to continue to keep our eyes open to the truth and to be willing to look at the evidence wherever it leads, even if that's not where we want it to lead. And that's the biggest thing I feel like I've learned through my deconstruction, is that just because I want X, that doesn't mean the evidence is going to point there. And do I value the truth more than what I want to actually exist? And the answer is yes. I want to know what the actual truth is. So, who knows? Maybe later today, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe next year, maybe 10 years from now, I will end up becoming convinced that I have the evidence to say that God is true. And if that's what happens, then you know what? I will say it. I will go around and tell people I truly believe that God is true. And I will present the evidence as to why. But as of right now, I can only be honest as to what I believe the truth is now. And I don't believe that that truth is Christianity. I just don't. Of course, that also caused some problems in my life as well. I don't have a relationship with my dad anymore because of that. He doesn't like certain aspects of my life. He doesn't like the leaving Christianity part especially. And through his choice, we don't talk anymore. And you know what? Maybe one day that changes, but not something I'm really holding my breath on. My mom was very upset when I told her that, yes, I am an atheist, but she came around. She's been the one that has shown me this term of unconditional love in my life. And not to say that our relationship is perfect, but if I were to say out of the Christian and the non-Christian parent, my mom, the non-Christian parent, is the one that has truly shown unconditional love and has truly shown, sticking it out, being there. Whereas my dad, the Christian, the one that is supposed to show that perfect love of God, no, not at all. And you know what? That's fine. Because I think that a lot of this journey had to be done on my own, and that's okay. Because I think that it really helped me focus on my own thoughts. What I believe about X, what I think about A, B, C, and I think that helped me form my own thoughts for myself. And I think that that's something that everyone should do. So, I'm going to start winding down, but my goals here are, I hope that this kind of helps answer people's questions that, yes, this was something very serious to me. My relationship with God was no joke. It was something that, to me, was so wrapped in my identity and was so number one in my life that that's all I could be. That's all I could do was talk about God, talk about how much I love Jesus, talk about the rapture, talk about soul winning, talk about the gospel. And even now, that hasn't changed. It's still a huge part of my identity, just on the flip side. And I think that that's just always going to be a part of it. I find these conversations to be fascinating. I love talking with people about it. And I don't really plan to ever stop. If eventually I get bored, and that's okay. But for now, I'm enjoying having these conversations. I'm enjoying learning new stuff every day. I love just listening to other people have the conversations, circling God, Jesus, the Bible, the resurrection, even some of the harder stuff of the Bible, like sexism, slavery, racism, all that stuff. I just find fascinating when people get together and discuss it. At least from where the position I'm at now, the remorse I have when I think about how I treated people when I was a Christian, the things I said to people when I was a Christian, and the delusional perspectives that I had of myself compared to other people when I was a Christian. They are all things that I regret, but they aren't things that I can take back. And like I said, all I can do is every day move forward, trying to work on being the best version of myself that I can be. There are people in the past that I wish I could apologize to because of things I've said to them, how I've mistreated them when I was a crazy Christian. And now, as a non-Christian, I just try to do my best to be fair to people, to listen to people, to try to be as empathetic as possible. And I think that I have noticed since leaving Christianity that all of that has to grow, which honestly was not something that I was really expecting. And it was something that was kind of shocking when I realized it was going on. My love for people, my empathy for people, my feelings for just everyone in general were growing so much, and I thought I was already at the top of it because I had the love of God for people. The love that Jesus has for you, that's what I had for you. And yet somehow after having this God belief, after leaving it behind, that's when I realized this is when I actually truly love people. This is when I actually care about people. And that made me really happy. And I'm glad that these things are growing for me. And if having no God belief is what got me there, then fine, and it be what it be. And I hope that, hey, if in the future I ever do end up holding a God belief again, that A, it's something that I have good information to back it up on. And two, that is something that will not allow me the excuse or give me the command or order to neglect other people. And I think that's one of the biggest issues I have with Christianity right now in the Bible is I can see lots of orders and commands that are harmful to other people for no good reason. And so that's one of the biggest reasons why I think just Christianity is just never going to be it for me again. But like I said, I don't know. We're looking for truth. And if somehow I find out down the line that Christianity is in fact true, then we will believe it. But maybe something else is. I'm open to it. Are you? So that's basically it. Uh, I hope this video was helpful. I hope it answered a few questions for some people. Um, right now, I am going on TikTok as Atheistic Preacher. I do plan on changing the handle in a little bit, so it'll be eventually Deconstructed Ex-Christian Notes. I'm going to change the YouTube to be that way as well. And we're going to do some different stuff pretty soon. We're going to go through the Bible. We're going to read stuff together, take some notes, listen to different sermons. I think we're going to get a lot more involved this year going through so much, really. I think that there's a lot of ideas going around, and I'm just going to put them out there. I hope that you guys like them. I hope that you guys feel free to engage in them. If you want to engage with me, you can comment here on this video. I'd love to talk with you. If you want to share your story of deconstruction or your story of reconstruction, if you feel like you do know how Christianity is true, I'd like to know that too. Please feel free to leave comments here. Also, you can see me on TikTok. The handle right now, Atheistic Preacher. But I will be changing it to Deconstructed Ex-Christian Notes probably in the next few days. But I do lives on there, and I can get messages on there. So lots of ways that we can talk. We can set something up. If you have any questions or if you just want to share your story with me or if you just want to discuss the Bible. Right now, with my conversations on TikTok, I feel like the topics I mostly swirl around have to do with the one that I bring up the most, the resurrection of Jesus. I think that that is the number one biggest thing that Christians should be wanting to talk about. I believe it's 1 Corinthians 15:5 that says that if Jesus did not rise from the dead, that your faith is in vain. So if we really want to say Christianity is the truth, if we really want to say Christianity is special, that there is something here in Christianity, then at the very least, we should be able to say, hey, we know Christianity is true because look at the resurrection. So what is the evidence that shows that the resurrection is an actual historical event? And the problem is that we don't have anything. The best of all the evidence that we have shows that at the very least, there was a group of people in that time period that claimed a guy named Jesus did XYZ. That's it. But the evidence that that person named Jesus did XYZ, we don't know. We don't have any of that. I haven't had any good answers to the resurrection. The most common answers I've gotten are the empty tomb, the Shroud of Turin, and the eyewitnesses. They're all bad answers for their own reasons, but none of them get us to Jesus rose from the dead, and we can say that as a confident fact. The other topic that is that one I feel this one I feel pretty much chose me because I didn't go out to have these kind of conversations. They just kind of happened. Slavery in the Bible and issues with the moral judgments and nature of this quote unquote God character. You know, it's claimed that he's good, he's perfect, he's justice, he's all loving, and yet when we look into the Bible, we do see the claims that he's just, that he's perfect, and yet we see horrible things that he allows and even sometimes orders or commands people to do that even go against his own moral standard and his own quote-unquote perfect law. So those are some of the conversations that I tend to have regarding slavery in Leviticus 25 and 2 Samuel 12, the judgment that God gives to David for his sin that involved killing his infant son and cursing his wives to be raped instead of anything actually happening to him. So the resurrection, moral issues, and God's character. And the last thing that I've been trying to get more into because I just think it's a fascinating topic, prophecies, specifically messianic prophecies. One of the biggest, wow things for me when it came in my deconstruction was this sudden understanding that all these people don't believe Jesus fulfilled the messianic prophecies. And I was always like, wow, because, he fulfilled, over 300 of them or something like that. There's just so many. And there's this guy called Justin Deconstruction Zone. You can find him on YouTube. You can find him on TikTok. And he is very knowledgeable, very educated on the topics. But he loves talking about the prophecies. And I remember hearing him say that Jesus didn't fulfill a single one. And I remember thinking, wow, a single one? Not one? What a claim. And I listened to him go through the prophecies that the New Testament says this was done to fulfill the prophecy in, this verse, this passage. And he went back and read the prophecy. And I realized very quickly how Jesus doesn't fulfill that prophecy. He read another one. Okay, yeah, no, I guess Jesus doesn't fit that one either. He read another one. Okay, yeah, I guess Jesus filled one part of that prophecy, but not the whole thing. And then as more went on, I understood why Jesus was rejected as the Messiah. He just doesn't fit the messianic prophecies. And so that's what I've been learning mostly on and going through and, trying to go back, reread everything in regards to that and get more solid on learning the messianic prophecies, their original texts, and where the New Testament claims they are being fulfilled. Going back, making the comparisons, seeing how Jesus fits them, how he doesn't. I think it's a very fascinating discussion and topic to just engage with. So if any of those interest you, or if you feel like you got the answers, again, you can comment. You can go on TikTok, send me a message there, or set up a time to have a live discussion with me. We can make it work. But yeah, thank you for being here. I appreciate your time and listening to my story. I hope that it does come across that, this is just truly what I believed at one point. I no longer believe it. I hope that I answered enough as to why. It was just over a long period of time. I just thought about it and sought the truth, and I didn't come out with Christianity. It wasn't the result I wanted, but I would rather follow truth than what I want. And at the end of the day, I can only hope that for other people. But I don't care enough to try to force a deconversion or a leaving of Christianity. And I understand everyone's different. If somehow Christianity is working for you, if somehow Islam is working for you, if somehow worshiping the moon and charging your crystals in it is worshiping for you, whatever it may be, and you're not hurting people, then you do you. But if you are hurting people, if you're using your religion to hurt people, then yeah, it's something that I want to call you out on.
because it's something that I used to do, and I wish I was called out on it. And I think that there are lots of other people that feel the same as me. We want to have these conversations with people to call out those that are actually causing harm, and we want to talk to the people who realize that they are being harmed, and maybe, just maybe, they just need a little help to fully understand that and that they can get the strength to leave. Because again, I didn't understand a lot of the harm that was happening to me when it was happening. It wasn't until later that I realized that wasn't good. That wasn't good, and you know what? It's as they say, hurt people hurt people. And I hurt people too. And I think I think the whole thing of deconstruction has become a scary term for Christians, people of faith, because all of a sudden there's this deconstruction movement, and all these people are like, I left my faith because of deconstruction. But I don't think deconstruction has to be a scary word. Deconstruction, as I said in the beginning of the video, is simply taking your beliefs and breaking them down so that you say, what do I believe and why? I could have remained a Christian. If my conclusion had reached that God was in fact real, I would just be a deconstructed Christian. And I would feel that I would have way more of a solid foundation as to why I believe what I believe. So I think, again, even if you are a Christian, or a Muslim, or anyone of any type of faith, and if you truly believe that your gods are the truth, then asking these questions and having these discussions, engaging with people that have these kind of doubts, it should not in any way affect it. It should not affect your faith. It should not affect anything about your relationship with your gods, because it's the truth. So if you believe that your God belief is in fact the truth, I challenge you to deconstruct it. Because again, if it's the truth, then it will stand. And if you truly believe it, I don't think you would be afraid to put it to the test. But that's where I'll leave you. I'll leave you to try to take that challenge on your own, and just see where you stand. I did it, and while it was kind of unintentional, I feel like I ended up just growing and changing for the better. I know people might not agree with that, but that's fine. They have their own lives, I have my own. I hope that if you do end up going through deconstruction, that whatever conclusion you end up reaching to, that you truly feel that you have a more and better solid foundation for it than you did previously. And that's all I really hope for. So with that, Happy New Year, and have a wonderful rest of your day.